welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you're good, and welcome to the second recommendation video for Tomes and Treasures Readathon. If you don't know what the Tomes and Treasures Readathon is, I will link down below mine and Smash's, aka Ash from Ashley's Bookish Life. I will leave our announcement videos down below, but it is basically a D&D based readathon that is running from the 1st to the 30th of April, and our hopefully first round is a character creation round. So a bit like when you play D&D and you have a character sheet to fill out, you have different prompts. There's a lot of different options to kind of make it something that everybody can enjoy, whether you've played D&D before or not. And we've done a video already each, which is to do with some recommendations for the class prompts. I will leave those linked down below as well. So if you're looking for some recommendations for the classes, that's where to go. Today we are doing some recommendations for the races prompts. So these are all magical races like elves, dwarves, and obviously humans. There's lots of different types to pick from. If you are new to the readathon, if this is the first time you're seeing anything about it, in the announcement video there is a link to the kind of like handbook for it. So it explains all the different categories, and then there's a booklet for all your prompts. It is very broad, as I say, so there's lots of choice. You can really make it your own, so feel free to check that out. With the races, there are a few, I did say this in the first video, but there are a few that we're not doing recommendations for because they are very subjective. So just as a reminder, I'm doing 4 races and Ash is doing 4 races, so both those videos should now be live, and hopefully I've remembered to go and link Smash's video, and if not, she is tagged, please go and check her out. Side note, I will probably refer to her as Smash from now on, so that's who I'm talking about. We've taken 4 of the races each to give you recommendations on, which means there are 4 races that we are not recommending. So just as a reminder, those are human because it's a safe bet, so like a 5-star read or a reread, 5-star prediction or a reread, which is obviously, I don't know your tastes. Elf is beautiful cover and half orc is questionable cover, and those things are very subjective. So again, I don't know your taste, so that is just kind of something that you find beautiful or you find questionable. And lastly, Goliath is an intimidating read, which again, that all depends on what you find intimidating. It might be a certain author, it might be a certain length, it might be a certain style, so it's kind of hard to do recommendations for those. So with that all done, let's get into the recs. Once again, I am super lazy today, so I will not be getting the books down, but there will be a picture here for you. So the first race that I have recommendations for is Dwarf, and the prompt for this one is to read a book with stone or metal on the cover. This can include things like a sword, a rock, a mountain, a building. You could say some buildings are made of stone. It could have jewellery on it, anything like that. So my first rec is Chasing the Bogeyman by Richard Chismer. This is one of my absolute favourite books. It reads like true crime, but it's fictional, although it is kind of based on something that happened when Richard Chismer was a young man. In this, Richard Chismer is like a self-insert character, and it's him kind of telling about when he was a young man and there was this serial killer in his hometown, and he's kind of moved back to the hometown. He's an aspiring writer, so very self-insert, as I say, and this serial killer is happening and he kind of gets pulled into the investigation. It is so good, like honestly one of my absolute favourite books. I really love this. Thankfully there is a sequel, which I'm very excited. I still haven't got to it yet, but it's happening soon, and it's just one of my favourite things. It's so well done, and the metal, because I know you're probably looking at this cover thinking, where's the metal? It has a metal railing on, and that's all you need. Once again, I will be kind of like bending these prompts as much as possible just to kind of illustrate how you can also do that. My second recommendation is a graphic novel called Check Please, and I'm probably going to butcher this person's name, I apologise, but I think it's Ngozi Yukazu. That might be wrong, I apologise, I forgot to look it up. But Check Please is a graphic novel, like I just said, and it's about this guy who is a figure skater at his high school, and he's really into it, but when he goes to university or college, there is no figure skating team, and he ends up kind of joining the ice hockey team, and it's a kind of like the growth of a relationship between him and one of the other guys on the hockey team. But also it's just about our main character being really like wholesome. He's really into baking, and he ends up living in this house with all these like, not frat guys if I remember rightly, but like sports people, but they just love him and his cooking. It's really wholesome, it's really sweet. It also only has 2 volumes, so it's really easy to kind of read the whole thing, and it's just honestly so sweet. It's much, because I think if I remember rightly, the main character has like a YouTube channel about cooking as well. So it's kind of him like branching out and finding all these new interests, and it's so wholesome, it's so lovely. And the metal on the cover, it could either be the pie pan. The pie pan looks like it's made of metal, so we could go with it. And also the ice skate blades. You can just about see some of the blades of their ice skates, so those are also made of metal. And as with the class prompts, I am doing 2 books and a manga for each one, although this is a book, a graphic novel and a manga, but just gloss over that. My manga recommendation is going to be Moriarty the Patriot, because volume 1 is quite clearly holding a gun. This is a Sherlock Holmes retelling, and your main character is kind of James Moriarty, because you're learning about him trying to kind of take on the establishment, almost like he wants to take down the nobility because he thinks it's really corrupt. All the others do appear: Sherlock Holmes, John Watson, Mrs. Hudson, Mycroft Holmes, Irene Adler. All of those people kind of appear. Sebastian Moran, my favourite. It is so well done. The art is so clean, is like the way I always describe it, because it's just how it looks. I find the art in this so lovely, and it's just a really, really good story, because he's the bad guy, but he's also trying to take down the corrupt. So it's a very good read. Our second race is Halfling, and the prompt for this one is to read a short read, and that's anything under 200 pages. My first recommendation is going to be both of the Monk and Robot books. So this is A Psalm for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crown Shy. These are both by Becky Chambers. I adore these books so much, and they're both under the 200 page mark. I think they're like 180 something. That might be wrong. I should have looked at that. But they were definitely under 200 pages, right? Okay, just double checked. The first one's 160 pages, the second one's 152 pages. They definitely count. I had a moment then. I adore these books so much. They are kind of like quiet sci-fi, and they're set in this future where mankind doesn't really use technology anymore because it gains sentience. Like, they had robots and suddenly the robots gained sentience. So they kind of came to this agreement, and the robots went to live off in the wild, and mankind kind of stopped using that level of technology. And we're following this person called Dex, who is a tea monk, and they go around and they make tea for people, and they listen to their problems and just kind of give them an ear. And Dex starts to have this, not like existential crisis, but they start to become really fixated on this one insect, I think, which hasn't been seen in like a really long time. They go off to kind of find this insect, which escapes me, and along the way they stumble across a robot, which is like the first robot that's been seen in however long, like a long time. And then it becomes this story about the robot learning about mankind and Dex learning about the robots, and kind of what's been happening in the time that they've been keeping away from each other. It's so beautiful. It's a lot about just kind of like finding your place and understanding the world around you and all sorts of things like that. And the kind of friendship between the two of them is just such a good series. I say series, duology, but I really hope that we're going to get more. Nothing's been announced, but I can hope. My second rec for this prompt is Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valenta. This is a weird little read. It's only about 100 odd pages, like 103, 104, something like that. And it's basically about this woman who is a bit Stepford housewifey, and there's definitely something going on with her husband, and everyone around her seems to be quite aware of what it is, but she doesn't. Like, she kind of thinks her life is perfect until she starts to pick up on things. I thought I knew what this book was going to do, and then I was wrong. And I just think that it is so good. Like, I really love what it does at the end, and kind of like the journey that you go on, because once you know, you look at the whole thing differently, and I just love that. And for the manga, I really could recommend pretty much anything, because 90% of manga that I have is under, well, that's a lie. 90% of single volume mangas that I have are under 200 pages. I wanted to go for one that I don't talk about as much on the channel, but what I realised is that I kind of just talk your ears off incessantly about the ones that I love. So I have spoken about it, but maybe not as much as like certain other ones. So I'm going to recommend Smoking Parade. This is kind of set in a world where you can get organ transplants really, really easily, like so easily. But there is this kind of issue where it could turn you into a monster. Then there is this team called the Jackalopes, who have kind of rejected that, and they rely on much more mechanical prosthetics and transplants and things. So they kind of use their prosthetics as weapons. There's a lot of guns in like legs and arms and all sorts of things. And their job is to kind of to stop these creatures, and they're also trying to figure out why this is happening. It's been a while since I read it, but I remember just having such a good time, and it's definitely one that I would revisit because I really like the characters in it and the world was really interesting, and I kind of wish that I'd read it all a bit closer together. So I definitely recommend this one, especially if you like kind of quite action-based manga. This would be a good one for you. Our next race is Aarakocra, and the prompt for this is to read a standalone. I had so many options for this. So many. My first rec is going to be The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I love this book so much. I think I'm just going to read the synopsis for this one because it's kind of hard to describe. This is the story of a murderer, a stolen child, revenge. This is the story of Ted. He lives with his young daughter Lauren and his cat Olivia in an ordinary house at the end of an ordinary street. All these things are true, and yet some of them are lies. An unspeakable secret binds the family together, and when a new neighbour moves in next door, the truth may destroy them all, because there's something buried in the dark forest at the end of Needless Street, but it's not what you think. I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. When I read it, it was like one of the best books of the year for me. I love the way that Catriona Ward writes, and yeah, highly recommend. My second recommendation is Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford. This is another weird little book. Just too much. It's like 208 pages, so it's just over what you would need for a short read, unfortunately. But it's basically about this girl who lives with her dad, and they live on the outskirts of the town, and they have this healing ability, and it's to do with like the ground, and it's really strange, and I love it. I think that's probably a terrible description of it, but they can basically use this patch of ground to heal people, but it's all very strange, it's all very weird, and I don't really want to say any more. If you like weird shit, you should read it. And my manga recommendation was not as hard as I thought it was going to be, because Junji Ito has a lot of bind-ups that could be considered standalones. The one that I've gone for is obviously going to be Uzumaki, because it's just my favourite. This is about a town that is cursed by a spiral. And I know what you're thinking. What do you mean? How could a town be cursed by a spiral? But it makes sense. Junji Ito makes it work. Like, the man managed to make the shape of a spiral creepy, because that's just how Junji Ito works. Each chapter of this is like its own self-contained short story, but there's also like an overarching plot, and they all tie together. And because of that, and the fact that it's all in one bind-up, I would say that it definitely counts as a standalone. And if you like manga, and if you like creepy manga, yes. If you are looking to get into Junji Ito, which I highly recommend, this is a fantastic place to start as well. So I would say for standalones, you could use Uzumaki, you could use Tomi, you could use, I think it's pronounced Gyo. All of those you could use for this prompt. So if you are looking to get into it, those would be some fantastic places to start. But Uzumaki is always my go-to recommendation. And our final race, I believe, is pronounced Genasi, I think. And the prompt for this is to read a book with an element either on the cover or in the title. So earth, water, air, and fire. Those are your four. All of my recommendations happen to be with it physically on the cover, but you can definitely use a book with like one of these words in the title. I just happen to have picked ones where it's all on the cover. My first recommendation is We Sold Our Souls by Grady Hendrix, because there is this flame behind her, on this version at least. So even if you have a different version, you can still count it. I've spoken about this a lot on the channel. It's my favourite Grady Hendrix, but we're basically following this woman who used to be part of a heavy metal band called Dwarf. And just as they were about to go absolutely massive and sign a big record deal, it all kind of fell apart. And only one of them went on to have a career in music. And she is kind of sitting there years later wondering how this all went wrong, because she doesn't really remember the night that it all went bad. She just knows that somebody else is living her dream. And so she sets out to kind of uncover the truth, and obviously because it's Grady Hendrix, there is some weird shit involved and some spooky shit. What I love about this book is that it has so much more to it. It is about the music industry. It's mostly about how women are treated in the music industry, It's about the power of social media and the kind of like mob mentality that it encourages. It highlights why you should never believe everything that you read online. There's just so much going on. This will always be my go-to Grady Hendrix recommendation, because as much as I love everything that he puts out, and I do, because he is one of my favourite authors, this is pretty easily my favourite because of the discussions that it has. My second recommendation is not going to be for everyone, but I'm going to recommend Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. If you're wondering where the element is, snow is frozen water. So it counts. This book started off as a creepypasta, and Felix Blackwell was writing it as if it happened to himself. But we're basically following this guy Felix, who goes to stay in a cabin in the woods up a mountain in the snow with his fiancée. Already quite a spooky setting, very isolated, and things start to go a little bit weird, and they keep hearing all these noises around the cabin. And one night he realizes that something is whispering to his fiancée through the window, through the walls, from the window to the walls. But the creepy thing is that she is whispering back in her sleep. I've said before, do I think this is a perfect book? No. But is it the only book that has ever truly scared me? Yes. So if you're looking to be frightened, this really brings the creep factor up. And yeah, I love it. Kind of want to reread it. There's the danger of me doing these videos is I just want to reread everything, but this is one of my all-time favourites as well, so it's tempting. And then my manga rec is going to be Zom 100, because the first volume he's driving a motorbike with a flame decal on it. And decals count. Stylized flames are still fire. This is one of my absolute favourite manga series. We're basically following this guy Akira, who hates his job. He hates it. It takes up all of his life, and it's honestly just really toxic and a horrendous place for him to be. And one day he wakes up and the zombie apocalypse has happened, and all he can think is that, oh my god, I don't have to go to work anymore. And he makes this bucket list of things that he wants to do, and he sets out to do all the things that work was kind of getting in the way of. And along the way he kind of makes friends and picks people up, and there's like this group of them, and I love everybody, and they're just kind of going around in the zombie apocalypse, doing all the things that they never got to do before. It's so much fun. It's very funny, but has made me cry a couple of times. I had kind of like an existential crisis reading this, because it was when shit was going on with my old job. I've talked about this before. But I just think that this is such a good series. It's by Haruo Aso, who is very quickly becoming one of my absolute favourite mangakas. I love the stuff that he puts out. Zom 100, Alice in Borderland. I've got Hide and Closer to try. Super excited to give that a go. But I just love the characters that he makes. There's just some way that Haruo Aso creates these characters and this story that really kind of speaks to me. So although Zom 100 is very, very fun, and if you just want to kind of like a bit of zombie apocalypse humour, it's there, but there's also a lot of heart to it. So that's all my recommendations for these races. As I said, Smash has the other 4 for you. So if you're undecided on what race, or if I didn't talk about the one that you're thinking of choosing and you want some ideas, head on over to Smash's channel and see what she has to recommend for you. Let me know in the comments below if you're planning on taking part in Tomes and Treasures, and if you've chosen a race yet, or if you just want me to know you're here. That purple heart is always appreciated. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're not already subscribed and you'd like to see more content from me, remember to hit that button, leave a like if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Prompts, I will leave that linked up below. We've each taken 4 of the races each. Wow. My second recommendation and our final race